May 14th, 2024. I'm actually not usually doing what I'm doing right now, but tonight on the agenda is scheduled reorganization of the school committee. So that means that currently, because of the election, we don't have a chair. So I'm playing that on TV. So I'd like to open the meeting, call the order at 6:06. And the first item of business is the reorganization of the school committee.
You want to address where Ms. Bergstrom is?
Why don't you go ahead and say it now that you already brought it up? Thank you.
Oh, I just wanted to let the committee know that Ms. Bergstrom had a personal matter come up on short notice, and so is unable to be here tonight. She wanted to let the committee know that.
So I would,
for Dr. Hackett, given that we already once postponed our reorganization so we could get through Springtown meeting, I think this is the third year we've done that, ish. Which I still think
At least 2 or 3, yeah.
It's a good idea. I think it works well. Pleased how town meeting came out. I think out of respect for all members of the committee who really ought to be here for a reorg, I would respectfully move that we postpone our reorganization under our policy until our next meeting when all 5 members can be present.
I second that.
Motion is second. Any discussion?
So that means suspending the policy till the next meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah, just to clarify, it's suspending the policy and moving forward with our current chair and
Yep.
vice chair configuration until such time as reorg can happen.
Yep.
And at such time that we have all 5 of us present.
At our next meeting where we can have all 5 present, yes.
All right, so we get that down?
Yep. Any other questions, discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
I
Opposed? 0? I gleefully turn the meeting back over to the sitting chair.
Thank you for the vote of confidence for one more meeting.
It's really just saying that,
All right, so the next order of business is public comment. And before I read through the public comment, Ms. Bolognese, would you be willing to be our timekeeper?
yes.
All right. So public comment shall be for a period of 20 minutes. This generally allows time for 6 or 7 speakers. Any citizen wishing to speak before the committee shall identify themselves by name and street address, I guess, and shall speak no longer than 3 minutes. All remarks will be addressed through the chair of the meeting. Public comment is not a discussion, debate, or dialogue between citizens and the committee, so committee members are not going to respond. We're just here to listen, and public comment is your opportunity to express your opinion on issues of school committee business. Written comments are always welcome. If you're going to go longer than 3 minutes, you can certainly send us an email, or if you don't have the opportunity to be here during public comment, please feel free to send email. You can send it to schoolcommittee@winchesterps.org. And with that, I believe that's it. Did people sign in?
I have not seen the sign in.
You have a list? If you haven't signed it, you can, we can.
Yes, if you'd like to sign it.
We can just have you.
It's blank.
Okay.
I
believe-
Set it over there.
I believe that we have people here.
Where do we sit if we want
Just not,
Somebody
that's,
at that table,
to?
but here, let me,
Was there someone else that didn't need to jump?
no,
Thank you so
just grab this.
much. Okay.
Rose will coordinate it.
thank you. Yes, the process is not always evident when you walk in the room, but.
Working on it.
Yes. All right.
Okay.
Thank you. My name's Michelle McCarthy. Thank you for the time. I live at 29 Oxford Street. I have 3 children in the public school system. Next year, I will have 3 children here at Winchester High School. Pray for me. I am here today representing some of the students and some families. I'm a longtime town meeting member, and some of the students and parents have reached out to me with what they're calling a campaign for GPA fairness. Some of you are new to school committee. Some of you may or may not know this. You might have children here at the high school. I didn't know it until I had a child at the high school. But Winchester is the only high school in the Middlesex League, and as far as we can tell, we're researching more and more every day, but definitely in the top performing public high schools in Massachusetts, we're the only one that if you get an A in a CP class, Winchester High School only gives you 3.7 credits. Every other high school in the Middlesex League that we compete against athletically. And every other high school, all the top performing high schools, we're calling them top 20 high schools in Massachusetts, schools such as Lexington, Hopkinton, Medfield, Dover Sherborne, et cetera. The list goes on and on. We were surprised to find that every single high school that we've researched so far, the top performing high schools, have all given their students who receive an A in a CP class a 4.0 credit. Winchester says, hey, this is a really hard high school. It's actually very rigorous, and you're going to work even harder. But when you get that A, we are not going to give you the 4.0. You're going to get a 3.7. I have some quotes from students here, but one of them I thought was pretty impactful. They said that we feel like we're working extra hard here at the high school. It's a more rigorous school, but yet we're getting less credit for all the hard work that we do. This inequity doesn't feel fair to the students. We are asking for fairness in the GPA scale so that we are consistent with other towns. We're asking for consistency throughout the Commonwealth, especially in our Middlesex League. We are asking for to be inclusive. I see that on the school committee's website where inclusivity is important. One of the ramifications of this is the negative impact on the students' mental health. They're saying that they're having severe stress and anxiety because they realize the unfairness. They see that their cousins and friends in other towns and nearby are getting a higher GPA than them, and some of them felt like it was impacting them in other parts of life. For example, some of them were recruited athletes, and they felt like they have a much lower GPA, midway through school than other recruited athletes, and they thought that that was having a negative impact, not only on their mental health and stress levels, but also as recruited athletes. And I think that that's really important. I think the mental health of our students is important. If it's anything affecting their confidence or self-esteem, my own daughter included, I think it's something that we should look at. And so this group of students and parents, we are asking for the school committee and for the principal to please meet with us. I think the kids are really great that I've met with. They're just a special group of kids. And I think if you hear from them, they make a very compelling argument. So thank you for the time. I have some documents here I'll leave with someone. I'm happy to help in any future meetings or working groups. I've put a lot of time into this and tried to help the students on this, and thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Hi, my name is Lauren Schiller. I live at 86 Church Street. I'm a Vincent Owen parent. I'm here tonight to respectfully request the start of open enrollment. It's a topic that I know many families have been eagerly anticipating that the superintendent and school committee address this spring. I'm glad to see it's on tonight's agenda. Families like mine require clarity around the open enrollment process urgently. There are a variety of reasons why a family might be requesting open enrollment. It's the best fit for their child's elementary education. In our case, we needed to move to a house that happened to be out of Vincent Owen District to meet the needs of one of our family members, but it didn't necessarily meet the needs of our elementary family members. We are very happy at VO, and our children's needs are very well met there. Our kids have made great strides over the past several years, and moving schools would be disruptive to that academic, social, and emotional progress. The two biggest reasons why our family moved to Winchester were the schools and the small-town community. That community is built on the backs of our schools, and the continuity of care and leadership being built into our children's lives fosters that community. Disrupting that network without great reason would cause unnecessary setbacks in our child's academic and emotional health at such a formative time. While I understand that approving open enrollment does not guarantee a spot for each applicant at their desired school, I strongly believe that each application should be considered through the process. If open enrollment is not approved, the needs of those students and families would not be able to be evaluated against our enrollment numbers. Please begin this process urgently so that our families can have an opportunity to submit applications and ease our children's concerns with questions about where they will be attending school in the fall. We ask that you approve it tonight and begin the application process as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you.
So next is Shanton, maybe?
I did sign. I am here for the unfair GPA scale, so it's the
Okay.
same topic that Michelle brought up.
Did you want to speak, or you're just here to support?
What's that? No, I'm good.
Okay.
I
Great.
think we all signed thinking it
Yes.
was like a
Uh,
sign-in sheet.
Yeah,
It's the
that's what
attendance
we
sheet.
thought it was.
Okay.
We didn't read, we just signed away. What kind of lawyers are we?
That's one, we now own your property. No. Darren, you're next.
All right, thanks for having me. Darren McCarthy, 29 Oxford Street, here in Winchester. Actually, married to Michelle. I wasn't going to speak, but I do feel it's important. So I'm a partner at KPMG, and I do a lot of hiring. And I will say the first thing I do is I look at GPAs. And if I didn't assume that all the colleges had standard GPA systems, I'd be doing a disservice not only to myself from a hiring perspective, but also to the children, and to, well, I should say the graduates. So if I'm making that decision based upon GPAs and what I see as what I assume is a standard sort of process, I have to assume the colleges are as well. So I just think it's unfair to the children to do that because regardless of whether you think all the colleges look at it or recalculate everything, there's no way that's possible considering how many colleges there are. So I'm just saying, as an employer who looked at GPA first, I would absolutely recommend you reconsider the way we do this. Matter of fact, it's illogical to me as to why we do it this way. And if possible, I'd like an explanation as to why we do it this way, as opposed to simply saying we're not going to change it. Thanks.
Thank you. Lauren is next. Oh, you
Oh, I
went.
think
Oh,
Lauren already went.
oh, wait, we have two Laurens. Lauren, so Lauren and Stephanie, you're present? Okay, excellent, thank you.
You're present.
Okay, is there anyone else who wants to speak? All right. Well, with that, thank you very much, and we'll close public comment and move on to the next item on our agenda, which are the superintendent chair and student remarks. So, Dr. Hackett, do you want to
I'll
lead
let
us
you
off?
lead off this evening.
Oh, wonderful, all right.
Wonderful.
Well, I don't have a lot to say. I wanted to certainly thank town meeting and everyone who supported our budget, our entire ask. I think that was very much appreciated by the district. I also wanted to give a shout out to Ipshita Chocoladar and Lynn Vizella, who were our 2024 recipients of the Sarah Swiger Awards. There was a wonderful reception, and I think it's really important to honor the work that they're doing. With that, I know spring is here, and so we're almost at the end of the year. It's a busy time. I want to turn it over to Maher to get our student.
I think there's a.
Do we?
Or we can just do student first. I'll be last.
Okay, we'll do students, and then we'll come back to.
Okay.
We're all members of the committee. So, but Maher was just down at the State House, and it has an update for us from Day on the Hill.
Yes, I had the wonderful opportunity of attending the Mask Day on the Hill last Monday, and Ms. Burks was not here, but I want to thank her and Ms. Bolognese for accompanying me to that. They took time out of their Monday work day to be there with me the entire day, and I deeply appreciated
I have
that.
pictures. I mean to send them.
Please send them.
I will send them to you.
We took some lovely photos over there at the State House. It was really nice to be at the State House. It was lovely to see and talk and hear from so many other school committee members and other communities. I got to talk to some students, which was also really lovely. A major topic that was discussed from many of the speakers from other committees was, of course, unsurprisingly, budgets, lack of funding, which understandably has been an issue. I had the opportunity to speak with Senator Jelen. She represents the district, of Winchester, Somerville, Medford, and Cambridge. I spoke with her and some of the students from Medford about ways that we can further incorporate diversity, equity, and inclusion into our curriculum. I was curious about incorporating that kind of on like a state mandated level. We talked about that, and obviously as different towns and communities would have different levels of needed incorporation of that. We couldn't do it on a statewide level, but we had a really good conversation about how we can incorporate diversity, equity, inclusion into our own communities. I also brought up how I had seen the recent youth risk behavior survey from not only Winchester, but from some other towns that I work with, and how we've seen that mental health and substance abuse has unfortunately been such a major issue. I had some really good dialogue with some of the students from Medford who echo that same concern. We were kind of just bouncing off ideas on ways that we can implement strategies to kind of ease that level of mental stress in these really, rigorous academic communities. So it was a good experience, and I'm very thankful for the opportunity. So thank you.
I heard there was some advocacy around an anti-tobacco campaign, or?
Yes,
Yeah.
there was. So I don't know if you I are aware of it, but there is a act called the Nicotine-Free Generation Act. It was recently passed in Brookline, Wakefield, I believe Melrose. Stoneham, thank you. Stoneham was the first to pass it, actually. Basically, the act it's actually really interesting. It basically says that if you were born after January 1st, 2001, you can never buy nicotine in that community, no matter your age. So while all of you who are born before 2001 would be able to, would be able to, with the exception of Rose, Michaela, and I would be able to buy nicotine in those communities. From now onwards, we would never be able to. So it really is getting at that idea of a nicotine-free generation, that the next generation to come is not going to have access to these nicotine products. And yes, you might say that, like, well, you can cross the border to another town. But as we kind of see, Stoneham has done it, Brookline has done it, most of these communities, you're having to travel farther and farther out to have access to these things. So it really is essentially putting a stop to that. So I spoke at that hearing in Stoneham back in November. We had a lot of opposition from, dealers, store owners, things like that, which was expected. To be honest, I didn't expect that it would pass, and it did. So Stoneham and Wakefield, done as of others, many towns. Reading just had a hearing last week. We are waiting to hear how that went. So yes, I talked to Senator Gillen about it. She hears our concerns, and the students from the other communities, actually more so than Winchester, said that they feel like drug use is unfortunately an issue in their communities. But if I will update more as we hear more about that.
Well, thank you for your leadership and advocacy. Michaela, do you have anything you want to, just in the student report, add, or you don't have to? I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you like.
Tennis match.
What we want, it was really fun. I'm sorry I came a little late. I was our senior day, so we were celebrating the seniors and had posters up for them. Sorry, I haven't been here in a while, but it's really great to be back. Just general updates. We had our TEDx thing. I don't know if you talked about it, maybe a little bit.
Go ahead.
But it was really fun. We had all this speakers come up, and we're making the video to post on YouTube now. So we're really excited for that, and the kids it just went better than expected. So we're really happy about that, and I think NOTA's coming up, Stuco. Our Night of the Arts is Thursday, and yeah, those are just kind of general things. But Maher did a great job, and her thing was a lot more important.
Excellent. Well, thank you both. Other committee members? Ms. Bolognese, did you?
I just wanted to recognize Mai Harrison, who's the recipient of the Chamber of Commerce's 2024 Citizen of the Year. She may be the first Asian American in our community to receive this honor. Since our days at Vincent Owen, volunteering for Junior Author Fest and multiple traffic duty and everything, also at McCall and at the Winchester High School, she's always just been an effervescent, enthusiastic, and enduring presence, leader, and role model, I'd say, in the community at large as well. So I wish I could be at your celebration tonight, but I just send my very best wishes and congratulations to you.
I would also just like to echo that. I spoke to her today, I emailed her letting her know that I recognized her support throughout the entire community. And as students, we see her all the time at the high school. I really can't imagine the high school without her support. So I just wanted to echo that.
Nice. Any other comments? You don't need to make comments, but if...
No, I'll just say to respond to Maher, so the Board of Health is actually has a scheduled meeting on Thursday night, and one of the agenda items for that is adopting the nicotine-free generation policy in Winchester. So just to make you aware of that, there was a public hearing that was held about 2 weeks ago.
I wasn't unfortunately able to attend that.
And so the vote may happen based on the agenda on Thursday. during the
Amazing.
Regular meeting. So.
Thank you for letting me know. I was aware of the hearing. I wasn't able to make it, but that's really, really wonderful news to hear.
Is there a public comment opportunity there?
There is.
So there's public comment.
Yes.
opportunity.
I can't say that for sure because I'm staring at the agenda right now and I don't see it on there. So
Okay.
It is this Thursday, you said?
the regular meeting is held on Thursday. I think because of the hearing, there may or may not, because there was a public
Special
hearing.
advertising for that,
Yeah.
right?
It's a special public hearing
Right. All right.
which happened. Sorry, just to be
Yeah.
clear.
If you wanted to follow up, Dr. Matthews knows people.
Happy to. I might have a connection.
Sounds good.
All right, so let's, Dr. Hackett, do you, what do you do? Superintendent
I
updates.
do, just a couple items, just a brief update on the elementary literacy study progress. So we did send out a reminder for the signups for parent sessions that went out, I believe, today and through Parent Square. But parent sessions will be starting on Monday, the 20th. And there's a combination of a couple in person and a couple that will be through Zoom. So there are registration links that people can find on our website. And that they're making great progress. The teacher survey went out. We actually dedicated some time at staff meeting for teachers to be able to fill that survey out, so the response was good. We don't have any data yet, but just by way of update. And then secondly, just wanted to, this is my report, okay? I do get a minute, okay? No, go ahead, I'm sorry, I'm just kidding.
No, I was just questions along the way. I'm sorry. Sorry to interject. No, I was just going to ask, with the listening sessions, are those are for elementary and middle school families?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And then with the survey, is that for families, is that also for elementary and middle school, or is it just elementary?
Ms. Kirby, is it survey for parents K through 8? No?
K through 5.
Okay, okay.
I lied. It goes up. Yeah, you're right.
All
K
right.
through 8.
It was an adjustment made, so it will be K
Yes,
through 8.
it just,
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it still coming out, or?
Yes,
Okay.
this week, I believe.
this week,
Yep.
yeah, that is their goal.
Okay. Great, thank you.
Okay. And then just mention that we are having a retiree celebration. We've done this a couple of years in a row now, before your next meeting on May 28th at 5:30 in the high school library. So those of you who can make it would be great.
And if I may put you on the spot, we do have a meeting to have with our high school athletics community.
We do?
About the renovation of the gym. I want to thank town meeting unanimously supported the renovation of the gym. Don't know that we have a date yet, but we are looking to do something right in the next week and a half.
Yes. We believe the 21st might be.
I saw that.
Okay.
That would be
Nail it
a
down
week
tomorrow.
from tonight.
Yes. We just know about Chris first.
that?
If we know Chris from the design team is available.
Got to circle back. If that's okay with admin, we'll circle back with Chris and see if he can do it. But, you know, I guess, would that go through Parent Square or an email from Mr.
Yeah,
Mahoney
we'll
or
put it out
something?
to us. Yeah.
So several parents have reached out to me to say, okay, it's great, they supported the gym, now when's the meeting? So we are actively working on it. So that'll come out soon.
Yes, sir.
I wanted to also acknowledge, because I jumped over this, I think, in the beginning, that Mr. Nixon had contacted me earlier. I know you have to leave, but we'll be hopping online, not yet, not for a half hour, but in a little bit. But just so, if he gets up in the middle of a presentation, you don't hold that against him. He had a prior commitment. And I think Dr. Hackett tonight is double timing as Andrew Marin and himself.
I am.
It looks like over there.
Yeah,
with
I've
two
got a lot going
computers.
on over here,
So,
and I don't really know what I'm doing, so,
So we're doing good so far.
thank you.
Are you good with your presentation?
set.
Excellent. All right, so moving on to our consent agenda. Should we take a motion for this and then I'll read them, or do you want me to read them first?
I'm
Or
happy to
pulling it
make a
off.
motion on the consent agenda to approve as submitted, with the only caveat that with respect to the Italy trip, the superintendent has the authority on his own to cancel that trip if he deems world events require it.
It's a lot of pressure. Okay.
Do we have a second for that motion?
Second.
Okay, and so let me just read our consent agenda. We have consideration of acceptance of $1,160 gift from the Massachusetts Association of Mathematics League for the Math State Meet on April 4th. Consideration of approval of the final 2024 to 2025 school year calendar. Consideration of approval of the 2025 Winchester High School Italy trip, and consideration of approval of minutes from April 9th, April 23rd, April 29th, and May 6th. Any discussion?
So I think the only thing is I would like to, and I apologize, I meant to send an email about this in advance, but for the April 9th meeting minutes, which I believe there would have been no way for Aaron to know I was actually there, but parked in the wrong Zoom room at my first virtual meeting.
Okay.
So it says in here that I was not at the meeting, but I was actually there for the entire executive session, not for the part where you all were in the separate Zoom room at the beginning
catch.
publicly.
Yeah.
So
I don't really remember you being there, but we'll,
there's no record.
there's no record of
Can
it.
we amend our motion?
We can adjust those to show you joined us in the executive.
Okay. I was just going to say the executive session minutes are separate, so in the public were you there in the public meeting?
I wasn't, because I was in the Zoom room waiting for the executive session, but I just didn't want the
Oh, okay.
appearance of that I wasn't at the meeting.
Oh.
Because I know the executive session meeting minutes
Because
are
in the
not
executive session meeting minutes,
public.
it would show up that you were there.
right, but those are non-public,
So Ms.
right?
Bolognesi makes a good point,
Yes.
I think, Dr. Matthews, that although you weren't there for the public session and the minutes are only for the public session, they
Right.
should probably just be approved as they are, but we can double check that he's reflected on the
I
executive
know that
session
because
minutes.
I actually did
You
a
did the
double take
executive.
when I looked at the April 9th minutes, and I was like, but he was there.
Yeah.
He was there. Should I mention something to Aaron, to Miss Allen? But then I thought, oh, but wait, these are the open session.
Correct.
So, and it was separate from the executive session.
Yeah.
So I would just say they're separate.
Well, I wonder if, given that this meeting lasted all of 30 seconds to a minute, if we might just put a notation there, because I think it was due in part to some error in communications on our side.
Yes.
He was sitting in the wrong room. Like, maybe we could just put
Yeah,
an asterisk saying. yeah.
Okay. Wasn't.
I mean, there's no substance to it, but I get the
Okay.
optics of it, yeah.
And I would just comment on the separately, unless.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
I am
Oh.
all set, thank you.
I was just going to say to recognize with the Winchester High School math team and the gift of $1,160 from the Massachusetts Association of the Mathematics League, that it was for that the WHS math team participated in that. They were fourth. And some of our competitors were junior Brian Zhang, who was the top scoring junior in this math league, and that freshman Daniel Wu also had a perfect score. So just wanted to recognize them for their efforts.
It's amazing.
Congratulations to them. All right, so any other discussion? All in favor of
Aye.
approving the
Aye.
consent agenda with those amendments?
And
Excellent.
Mr. Chair, just may make a friendly suggestion to
Yes.
Dr. Hackett. The calendar we just approved has a couple of items that are highlighted.
Yes.
Might be helpful if we highlight the change in school start time. I'm not sure how
Yep.
many people have been following that terribly.
We're gonna put that out,
carefully.
we'll put that out separately, so we'll call that out as part of it, so.
Yeah.
And just for the public, the changes on the calendar for next year are two things. One, the pre-K through 5 parent-teacher conferences in October, we had to adjust, just back them up one day because we have WIFI Author Fest that was scheduled during that week, so we need to avoid that conflict. And we're also moving the March workshop day that I believe was scheduled for March 4th to when town elections happen, so that we can have full access to the high school space for that, so.
And may I ask one other question related to this? So do we know if Mr. Uria has communicated the change in dismissal time to Middlesex League districts? I know we tend to get out late compared to our peers, and we show up to play, and they're waiting for us.
Not yet, because he's waiting for this
Okay.
tonight, so, yeah.
Thank you.
All right, report, update, and action items. Youth Risk Behavior Survey presentation from Aaron.
I think that
Andrew, can you
I know
put
you
this
well
on?
enough now to know that maybe you should just take this. And then you just push the arrow on the bottom.
Thank you.
Yeah. I don't,
The differentiation. I know, I like it.
thank you. I don't want to mess it up. That's kind of what I'm doing here.
All right, just pressing the next. Hello, I'm Erin Kuhn. Nice to be here tonight. I'm excited to get to share some information about the YRBS 2023 survey with all of you. So I just wanted to start off to share a little overview of the Youth Risk Behavior Survey. This survey built on the surveys of 2017, 2019, and 2021, and they are also include our Middlesex League districts as well, so they participate with us. So these communities work together with JSI, which is a public health consulting firm, and develop the middle and high school YRBS, and it's based on the U.S. Center for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, and their Youth Risk Behavior Survey, and Massachusetts Department of Public Health's Youth Health Risk Survey. So the goal here is really to capture some important information related to health status and to certain health risks that have been deemed as putting students' health at risk in middle or high school. And this is administered online in the spring every 2 years in grades 6 to 12. So here's an overview of the 8 different categories that there are questions asked under on the survey. And tonight we're going to look at the data that focuses on mental health, self-harm, and suicidal behaviors. So we just want to start to be sure everyone has a chance to take a quick look at the key terms and acronyms. You'll see these throughout the report, and most importantly, they're looking at male, female, transgender, gender diverse, heterosexual, LGBTQ+, multiracial, and Hispanic or Latino, Latinas. They will come up throughout the presentation. So this gives us some information at the middle school. There were 929 middle school students who participated in the survey. And of those, there were some when students either complete less than half of the survey or they complete the survey in a time that is much faster than the average speed. They take those out in the data analysis. So there were a total of 851 middle school students, or 82%, who participated. And then over in that grid, you can see the number of students in our different subcategories. And at the high school, there were 1,211 high school students who participated. 1,114 of the students' information was included, and that was 81%. And it's worth noting at the high school that a significant amount of seniors don't participate in the survey. That's the lowest number of responses we have. So the majority of the survey is information from our 9th, 10th, and 11th graders. And I did just want to back up. Whenever looking at data like this, I just like to, remind us all that while we're looking at a lot of numbers and we're going to look at a lot of graphs, that, behind these numbers are our students. So I just always encourage people to, think about your own student or students you see out in the community, and just remember that there are, real faces behind the data. So we're starting with the general mental health data. So here on the data points that I'm highlighting tonight, the first number you'll see is the number of students who responded in this way, and then next to that is the percentage. Sometimes it's helpful to see the actual number to give it a little more meaning. So when we look at the general mental health, this is students reporting that their mental health was not good sometimes, most of the time, or always in the past 30 days. Remembering this data was collected at the end of April in 2023. And they were looking at the month before that. So we have 39% of students reported this to be the case at the middle school and 61% at the high school. And these graphs just show us some of the statistically significant data that was gathered through this process. So here, in the bar graph where you see the numbers, so for female, there's 205, and for transgender, gender diverse students, there's 14. That's the actual number of students, and the graph itself is showing the percentages. So if we look at McCall, we see that there's some, I'm going to keep stumbling on this all night, statistically significant differences with our female students and our transgender students, and around sexual orientation with our LGBTQ+ students. And we see a similar
representation at the high school as well. We do have some data over time here, so we can see from middle school, we have the data from 2021 to 23, and we do see a decrease in students reporting that their mental health is not good. You can also see the square with the Middlesex League data there, so we're not far off from them reporting similarly there. And at the high school, we've also seen a drop from 68% in 2021 down to 61%. So again, some fewer students reporting that, so it's headed in the right direction. And here we have some information about sad and hopeless. The students here were asked if they felt sad or hopeless almost every day for 2 or more weeks in a row, that they stopped doing their usual activities. And this was asked over a 12-month period of time that they were reporting on. So here we see there were 78 students at McCall that reported this, and 255 at the high school. Graph here, this shows data at McCall, so there were more female students and transgender students reporting this, and LGBTQ+. And we have a similar representation here at the high school, but we also see that Hispanic, Latina students were also reporting higher incidence of feeling sad or hopeless at the high school. And over time, we see a slight decrease in the 2023 data around this report. So, that's a trend in the right direction. And we can also see, looking back to 2017, that this is something that our students have been, dealing with, and is not a new issue, but something that was with us even pre-COVID, and that we're continuing to try to support our students on. So next, we move into stress and anxiety. They were asked about the time they felt tense, nervous, or worried every day for 2 weeks or more weeks in a row, and that it involved them in stopping to engage in some usual activity. And for this, they're asked to look back over 30 days. So 147 students at McCall reported this experience, and 374 at the high school. We see here that we also had some statistical significance in our female population and transgender population at McCall, and with LGBTQ+. And then similar at the high school with the significance with our subgroups. And again, here we see that Hispanic, Latina youth also reported feeling more stress and anxiety. So I just wanted to, as we move into the data on self-harm, just provide a little clarity here, that self-harm and self-injury and its difference and connection to suicidal behavior, since we'll be looking at this data moving forward. So just making the point here that while there's some similarities between self-harm and suicidal behaviors, there are some differences, and those are the intent, level of damage, frequency, or level of psychological pain. And there are some common risk factors, so some of them are here, trauma, chronic stress, really extreme emotions, feelings of isolation, lack of coping skills. And just to note that while they are separate, there is a connection where students who self-injure can be more at risk for having suicidality, either ideation or attempts in the future. So at self-harm, students are asked if they've hurt or injured themselves on purpose without wanting to die over the past 12 months. So we see we had 54 students at McCall report on this, and 171 at the high school. And here we see some statistical significance in our transgender and LGBTQ+ populations at McCall. And at the high school, we see the same, and in addition to that, we see some significant statistical significance in our multiracial students with a higher report of self-harm. And over time, we see a 1% increase this year, but we've really hovered in that 15% area since 2017, and just a couple percentage points different than the Middle League other districts. And just again, for clarification here, suicidal ideation is thinking about suicide. You may have an intent or a plan. That makes it a more intense situation. And then a suicide attempt is someone wanting to harm themselves to end their life. So looking at students who've experienced the suicidal ideation, so that's thinking about suicide, we had 48 students at the middle school report that in the past 12 months prior to taking this survey that they had experienced some suicidal ideation, and 98 high school students. So here, again, we see similar statistical significance in a higher incident of suicidal ideation with our transgender, gender diverse students and our LGBTQ plus at McCall, and similar data at the high school. And over time, we are seeing a decrease in suicidal ideation since 2017, going from 14% then and down to 9% now. And finally, the suicidal data, students that reported attempting suicide in the 12 months prior to taking the survey, 8 students reported having that experience from the middle school, and 14 students at Winchester High School. So some of this data is very heavy, I know. Keeping that in, considering that as we look at this. So again, for attempted suicide, just identifying some statistical significance with our LGBTQ plus populations. And seeing a decrease here down to 1% from 4% in 2017. So the first thing I just wanted to show is the crisis intervention and support because of the importance of this and the heaviness, just remembering that there are lots of resources out there if anyone is ever in a crisis and needs immediate support. So I just wanted to remind people of that as we sit with this data. Also reminding all of us that there are things we can look for. There are risks that we can look for and pay extra special attention to students in our life if we know they have that going on. And also warning signs that we can pay attention to if we start to see shifts in anyone in our life in any of these areas or behavior. I want to credit the Clay Center at MGH, has wonderful resources for parents and community members to be able to get more information and support if they're looking for it in any of this topic, in mental health or self-harm and suicidality. Just reminding us there are things we can do as parents and caregivers and community members. The one I want to just highlight is it's really important to ask your child if you're worried. There's a myth out there that if we ask anybody, but specifically thinking about our children, if we mention or ask about suicide or suicidal ideation, it could increase or give them an idea to engage in that. But the research really finds that that's not the case. If anything, sometimes it helps people to feel better because they recognize that someone's noticing and there to support them. So there's just some other things people can consider here. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about what we're doing in the schools to support students' mental health. Kind of looking globally, we have developed some social emotional learning standards, and this is really a way to help us identify and almost create a roadmap of what we're teaching in terms of social emotional skill development. And why this is important is because social and emotional skills can really help us to manage our mental health in general, or if we start to come up with a tough time or some difficult emotions from a situation, the stronger our social emotional skills are, the more likely we are to be able to help ourselves, reach out to others, etc. Similarly, there's structures and routines that support social and emotional skill building in our communities, in our schools, our classrooms. There's things we can do to help create, connected, affirming environments, to help kids to feel safe and seen and like they belong, and that's a lot of the work that we're focusing on across the district. Similarly, there are instructional practices that provide students the opportunity across all content areas to get to practice social emotional skills, see them modeled, practice them, receive timely feedback from their teachers. So that's an important part of what we can do for everyone in our school environment. There's explicit teaching of social emotional skills, so that's when we have lessons that teachers can teach to students to really break down a lesson and be able to teach them that. We also have the Ruler program, which does that and supports that K-8. We have direct instruction. There is direct instruction about mental health in our schools, specifically our health curriculum in middle school and high school, that just educates us about what is mental health. And we also have guest speakers that come into the schools from time to time to speak about mental health and individual experiences. And we offer professional learning opportunities for our educators to learn about mental health and how to best support students in the classroom. And then we're taking data. We have the YRBS data, the MCIEA data, observational data, that we're always looking at to see how we can better support our students in terms of their overall well-being and skills, and our climates, in our schools, in our classroom. And this allows us to engage in continuous improvement to support our students. We also have groups and committees across the different schools for different groups of people to explore things they're interested in or to find connections with others who may have similar identities or interests. We have counseling staff. We're very fortunate in Winchester from K to 12. We have SEL coaches and adjustment counselors at the elementary level, and school counselors and school psychologists at the elementary level, and school counselors and psychologists from middle and high school across the buildings. When we do have situations where kids might be in crisis or having some significant mental health symptoms, we have licensed mental health counselors and school psychologists across the district that engage in using safety protocols and safety plans to help support students and families through those times. They can also provide connection to outside providers and communicate with outside providers to support whatever it is the students need. And we're also looking to begin using the Signs of Suicide Screener in the 24-25 school year in grades 6 to 12, which provides some additional education for students around suicidal ideation, and provides a screener for us to be able to get a sense if anyone is at risk. And that is something that parents have the opportunity to opt students out of if that is what they prefer to do. In our schools, we have building teams. This is a group of individuals, professionals in a building that come together, and they provide support to teachers. So they help teachers to identify strategies and interventions to help support students, whether it's academic concerns that teachers may have around a student, or if it's around social, emotional, or behavioral concerns. And we have, at the high school, we have the Excel and Transition program. The Excel program supports students' academic and social emotional support for the general education population, and the Transition program that specifically supports students who may be in or out of school for an extended period of time because of a medical need. And in our special ed programming, we have the partnership program at the middle school and the LC3 program, which provides mental health and academic support for students throughout the school day. As I wrap up finally, thank you for sticking through this with me, we have community support, and I want to make sure we recognize how we're all working together. The PTOs across the district provide great supports through guest speakers that they often have and events for families and parents and educators that we can come together and learn. The Winchester Coalition does a ton of support around programming and resources for our students and the larger community. And then there's the community service. There's the Advocates Mobile Crisis Hotline that is around every day of the year, all day, to provide crisis support to families who may need it. There's the William James interface, which allows you to reach out, and they take your information, and then they identify some therapists in the area that might be able to meet your needs and get you connected there. And that is something that we're fortunate enough to have in Winchester, thanks to the coalition. And then the town also has Kristen Romaine, who's the mental health and wellness coordinator for the city, and Susan Norton, who is the Winchester social worker. So just, really, as I step back and look at it, we have lots of resources and lots of people looking to support one another. And then finally, there's just, you go online, there's a multitude of different agencies out there, but looking to support us as parents and educators and our students around their overall well-being and mental health needs. Any questions or comments?
Any members?
Want me to bite first?
Sure.
Can you go to slide 32 for a moment? Parents and caregivers. So I have a question, which is, I think for a lot of our students, when they're really showing signs of stress, it's often their peers that can pick up on it.
Mm-hmm.
That sort of peer-to-peer relationship among students is really important. I wonder, what are we telling students today at McCall and at the high school about what they can and should be doing if they become aware that there's a friend in crisis? Who should they be talking to, and what should these sort of student reporters expect? Because obviously, if you're going to communicate that information, you want to know something's happening. But that can be difficult, given the circumstances involved. So can somebody just sort of talk about that?
Yeah, I think the good news is when we look at a piece of the data is around student connection to peers. And overall, we have a pretty high number of students who report they at least have one peer or friend they can go to with a problem, which is great. What's communicated to the students in the middle school through health and in the high school, and there's going to be even more that I can speak to in the high school for next year, but is to go to an adult. There's really that differentiation of being a good friend and listening, but this is more of an adult, adult's job to help. So they're directed to go to teachers, counselors, or their own parents if they're more comfortable with that. So it's really the message of a trusted adult. They're clearly identified in the building as a teacher or your guidance counselor, since everyone has an assigned guidance counselor. Or their family, if that's where they're most comfortable, that can then communicate to us. So, we really do work to differentiate that this isn't something for you to hold. We also explore that idea, but what if my friend gets mad at me? And, we try to support kids to understand that, even if you're afraid of that, ultimately it's, what we need to do and that relationship can be repaired. So they get that in their curriculum at McCall, and they also have speakers from NAN often come in, people who've struggled, young adults who've struggled with mental health challenges that speak to the students, and they often, through telling their story, talk about that and how someone might have helped them or someone told an adult and how they were ultimately happy about that. So that's how it's really communicated there. We are getting our health PE teachers trained this summer in youth mental health first aid, which is really exciting. So that's going to become part of the health curriculum in sophomore year moving forward. So again, and that's where they get the education again about mental health, the different impacts as they do get older, that they might be dealing with different types of issues and, different friendships, and, the same messaging there of how do you support your peers, but then get it to the adults so that they're not carrying that themselves.
So Erin, I have a follow-up question then. So let's say you have a would-be student reporter who's very concerned about a peer, for whatever reason, not comfortable going to an adult in the school, or maybe actually doesn't have a perception something's happening, doesn't have a perception it's being taken seriously. The perception may be wrong.
Yeah.
Has a conversation at home with mom and dad. What is the district's expectation for parents who hear that? Is that a call to guidance? Is it a call to the principal? What should families do? They're hearing that information from a child who's concerned about a peer.
I mean, I personally always just recommend reaching out to the school if you're hearing information like that. I think when it's coming to student safety and well-being, I think it's worth a phone call to say, just wanted to let you know, and
Is that a guidance? Is that a conversation with guidance? Is that a conversation with the principal? I'm looking at Dr. Hackett as well. I mean, where should parents be placing that call?
So if parents have a connection to an adult at a school that they have good faith in and have a relationship with, and they feel comfortable reporting it to that person, maybe then a principal, then they should do that.
Yeah.
We just all we care about is that they report it.
Yep.
It could be the principal, guidance counselor, but the principal ultimately will know. So we just want to make sure that people make the contact.
So at the end of the day, it's where you feel you've got the good relationship.
Right.
Got it.
Ms. Sharawat?
I was actually going to ask Ms. Cute about that, if there is any move to have that mental health training be part of the health curriculum. I'm really happy to hear that it is, because I feel like that transition from middle school to high school is a really major transition, especially in Winchester. I feel like more so than other towns. Having gone through it ourselves, it definitely isn't easy, especially in that kind of freshman, sophomore year. And I think that we did get a lot of direction about who you could go to and where your resources were in 6th, 7th grade, but I feel like it's just as much, if not more, necessary when you're making that transition to high school. So I'm happy that they're incorporating that. We do RAD, we do CPR, and not that those aren't great tools and great things, but happy to hear that mental health side is being accounted for. So are they set, is it set in sophomore year, or are they thinking maybe incorporating it in freshman year as
The
well?
program itself only allows you to start it sophomore year. It's an
Okay.
actual program they're getting trained in. So it's interesting to think about how might we approach it in ninth grade. What's popping into my mind right now is the ninth grade mentoring program.
Yes.
But I think it's definitely worth looking into how else can we communicate and support students when they enter in ninth grade?
100%. I think that, not that it wouldn't be extremely helpful in sophomore year, but I think that really key,
Yeah.
like that fall, I think that that's kind of where a lot of mental health issues arise. And I feel like when we talk about like getting to like the quote unquote root cause of a lot of these issues, I feel like sometimes those root causes start in that transition into freshman year. But I'm happy to hear that they're incorporating that. That's really
Yeah,
great.
thank you for
news.
adding that.
Other committee members? Yeah.
So I'm happy to go. I won't belabor the point. I probably have some questions that'll be helpful to follow up with you offline about. But as far as I know, I'm probably the first open member of the LGBTQ plus community that's on the school committee in Winchester. And I have to tell you that when I received this presentation, what I saw was almost crisis level, right? I know that the thing that I would most benefit from is having a sense of whether there is a possibility of doing comparison data to other districts in the Middlesex League, and if there were also a possibility, I don't know if it's administered on a broader level, where we would actually have access to other communities' data, whether at the Massachusetts level or the Boston Metro area, whatever it happens to be, right? But being able to sort of have a sense of where we are, because I saw that you very helpfully inserted a couple of places where the Middlesex League number was sort of keyed up as a comparison to ours, for example, on slide 9. But I have a very high level of concern viewing these data.
Yeah.
And I think I am particularly sensitive to the fact that the statistically significant comparisons were almost always among LGBTQ plus students and transgender students. It's not to say, I mean, especially around self-harm, I noticed that we have, some racial, ethnic dimensions to consider. But the place where it's consistent from dimension to dimension is the same. And so I think I don't see a lot of, I guess on a year-by-year basis, I don't see a lot of change. I see sort of little bits of up and down here and there, but certainly not any noticeable step function change in how things have gone since 2017. So what I would love, I guess, as a question to you is, sort of, are there efforts underway, looking at slides 33, 34, 35, are there efforts underway, to specifically support the students who are having these exponentially higher rates of all of these dimensions, suicidal ideation, self-harm, specifically around LGBTQ plus and transgender gender identity issues?
Yeah, I think, since I, came here last year, I know there's been a lot of work with educators, so a lot of professional learning, professional development opportunities to try to just help people to better understand how to support students. I think one thing I would love to do is be able to start having more conversations with students, because I'd like to hear more from them, what their experience is. So I feel like us getting some more information will help to guide that. Right now, when I think about what we're doing, some of it is not maybe specific to the transgender LGBTQ plus population, but it's this piece of, like, when I think about our new SEL standards, which integrate SEL and social justice concepts, we're looking at teaching self-awareness and social awareness. We're talking about dignity. We're talking about compassion, empathy, understanding others' perspective. So I see some of that as a big piece of this work, just that we start to really continue, it's already happening in places, but that we're continuing to get more intentional about how we're going about that. So education as a big part of that. Then I think it is gathering more information from students in those populations to get a sense of what are they experiencing to guide us, and what else can we be doing to support them and to continue to try to shift you know, what are some of the root causes there? You know, where can we have some influence to better support them? Because I agree, I mean, it was to see the data light out like that was surprising.
So from my own past work, I mean, so Alon Meyer, who's a researcher in California, has actually done quite a bit of work around the idea of minority stress. And in my prior academic work, one of the things I was trying to do my sample was largely, my research participants were largely LGBTQ plus parents. But one of the things I tried to actually survey them on was this idea of minority stress, and obviously it doesn't just apply to kids who are LGBTQ+, it also applies to kids who have different racial ethnic identities or mixed race identities. But I think that, you know, it might behoove us to have a conversation about ways in which we can do a more deep survey of those students and try to understand better sort of, you know, whether there are discernible dimensions, right? Discernible facets of their experience that are actually driving some of because, you know, obviously I'm married to a public health researcher, so I understand the public health side of things, but I'm myself a psychologist, right? And so it's sort of trying to understand, like, what is actually going inside of their heads, right? Because obviously there are these things, right, that we, for very good reasons, are looking at, but we might not necessarily understand why those things are happening. And I do wonder that, you know, and I'm certainly happy to play a role in this in any way that's helpful, but sort of, you know, being able to sort of tease apart some of the threads of, like, okay, so we know self-harm, suicidal ideation, you know, general anxiety, whatever it happens to be, are present, but why? Like, what is it that's driving that? And are there ways that we can kind of safely tease apart those factors and get some more information and then target our programming accordingly? So I'm happy to help in any way.
If I can also just jump in from the curriculum perspective, so there's a lot that we're doing with these pieces, but I think like the last 7 or 8 years, like as we started our work with, before Erin came, when we started our work around the social justice standards, really also like making a commitment to windows and mirrors so that all of our, like, what students are seeing, what they're hearing, all students, is inclusive. So that kind of through that, I don't want to say immersion, but that's how we all really, like, how we learned language, like through that process that's, you know, normalizing this expectation that everybody's not, you know, exactly the same, and letting them have those connections that sometimes then when teachers can talk about characters or can talk about things in history or can talk about, it depersonalizes it for the moment to allow to have more of those conversations where it's not about turning to this one student, which is often what happens in education. It's like, oh, you know, can you speak for all of the Black students? No, I cannot. So like really trying to make our curriculum so that it supports it through that work rather than putting the work kind of on the students, so.
I would just.
Tom.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
Sorry,
go ahead.
no.
No, you go first.
I just had a question to Mr. Nixon's point about how, you know, if a student has a concern and who they should approach, what trusted adults are in the school. I'm curious, do staff do any kind of, I apologize if I don't know, but do any sort of like formal training about if a student were to bring up an issue regarding physical, mental health, like how that is to be handled? Like, is there a protocol or conduct for that?
That's a good question. I don't know if there's a formal protocol. I think, you know, tied into our professional learning around this work, tied into the work, I know that's how our guidance counselors and our psychologists and adjustment counselors communicate with teachers, but I'm not sure. I'd have to look in to see if there's a specific protocol, but please jump in if I'm missing something.
How are you thinking about it?
I guess the way that I was thinking about it is, like, say like a concern was brought to a teacher and they may not understand the extremity of the situation. Like, would they know, okay, do I approach the parents? Do I approach the principal? Do I approach a guidance counselor? Do I speak to the student and, you know, see what happens? Like, is there a kind of, do staff know where to go? And I don't have an answer, you know, where the right place to go is, but have we discussed that?
I'm not, we don't have a specific protocol.
Okay.
I think there are teachers who would feel more comfortable calling a parent. They'd be more comfortable in the conversation with the student. I think all of our teachers would be able to recognize a student in crisis, and that would be reported. We're mandated reporters as well under the law. We do training in that. But it's a great question, and maybe we need to be more explicit about it. But the referrals do happen, and I think, all of our teachers care about our kids, and I think if they feel like, of course, right, if they're over their head or they really feel like a student needs some support, then they would reach out to guidance or someone within the administration.
Can I make a follow-up comment? So the reason I asked my question earlier is if you look at the back of the full report, there's the year-over-year responses, and it does compare to Middlesex League. I'm disappointed that less than 58% of McCall's students feel they have a teacher or adult they can talk to about a problem. That number actually was unchanged from the last survey, and that is below the average response in the Middlesex League. So this survey gets at many different issues that are of concern to all of us, but maybe I'm oversimplifying. I see one of this is to me almost like this could be that lifeline. So I think regardless of what the issue is, having someone you can talk to me is so fundamental to student safety and well-being. And I suppose I haven't put this fine a point on it in the past, but if there is something that I think we need to work on, and I think it would be reasonable to come up with a plan that would be successful, it's around the communication piece. That number feels just like inexplicably low to me, whether it's that teacher, Dr. Hackett, a guidance counselor, it's Mr. Lynn, or whoever it is at McCall Middle School. I feel like many more than, it's not even 58% of students feel there's someone they can go talk to. So I'd like to see us address that. At Winchester High School, that number did go up from 21 to 23. It's higher. It's at 62%, but still kind of noticeably lower than the Middlesex League, which is over 2/3. So we're sort of underperforming in that regard. And then just my last comment is, I was surprised at how few seniors took it this time.
That's true.
30% fewer seniors took it this time than they did the previous survey. So I don't know, and I know it's offered online, so I don't know what was going on in the world of seniors at Winchester High School, but I don't think that's been typical to see such a low participation rate, and I hope we can figure out why that happened and get that back up next time. And now I'm done talking, I promise.
I would just also make a general comment. What I've always been concerned about with surveys is that it's a moment in time, right?
Yep.
It's kind of like MCAS, like the
Yep.
kids who took the test aren't the kids who are going to take it next year. So these are cohorts of kids.
Yep.
But there are trends and things that we can look at, and like the question you just raised, what is going on? And I think so much of these surveys also depends on the question and the perception of the question. So that work is work that comes to mind for me. So as we dig down into that question, what are the questions that are being asked of middle school students, and how is it, are the questions clear enough and influencing? And the example you gave is not a good one, because the data, there's definitely a gap.
Yeah.
And Aaron's been doing a lot of work at the middle school this year. James has been doing a lot of work on the middle school this year. But what bothers me the most about the data is when we have a percentage of kids who are reporting that they are hurting themselves, and we don't know who they are. Like the data here, we don't get individual student results, which is always concerning, and that's always the conversation. Do we know who these kids are? And I think that I feel as though the answer to that question is we generally have a good idea, staff has a good idea who they are, but it's not as actionable. So when Aaron talks about really kind of getting down to some focused kind of groups and having conversations with kids, that's just the step that we need to take. When we talk about budget and what we don't have in our budget, we don't have really, we've done a great job as a district with SEL support. We've done a great job as a district with psychologist support. We have a lot of supports in place. what we're struggling with now is really trying to figure out how to deliver the health standards, because we don't have designated time. We have health teachers at the middle school. We just, it's a tight schedule as it is. But based on how much we want to do, really, we need to have a conversation about what the expectations would be, which then could translate into a discussion around staffing moving forward.
I would argue that conversation should look at what's going right at Winchester High School, because in 4 years, the number of students who said they feel they have an adult they can talk to, that's gone up by 40%. We went from 48% to 55%, and now it's at over 62%. So how's that working right? There could be explicit things like wind block that contribute to that, but I don't know that that's the case, but that looks significant to me.
And it's also just to keep in mind that we had COVID sprinkled in there too, right? So some of that has to be accounted for in the data in terms of any kind of bounce like that. We don't want to overestimate the bounce up either.
I think you see COVID's influence if you go back one more survey and look at the 2017 results, and you'll see that dip, but then you see a very sharp recovery.
So, do you have anything?
Oh, I was just going to express some gratitude to the appreciation to the counseling staff. Wow, this is really loud all of a sudden. To the counseling staff, because I guess for one of my students. So, I mean, I'm grateful that they're very open with me, and they'll come and talk with me about stuff that they have run into or things that they're upset about. But sometimes it's stuff that I just don't really have an answer for. So I usually give the recommendation, please just go talk to your teacher, or go talk to your guidance counselor, your adjustment counselor at school, and my student or some other students, they generally, they have done that, and the teachers have been so helpful, and just a nice listening presence, and then they'll send them on to guidance counselor, adjustment counselor, SEL psychologist, and they just listen and give some really nice advice. So I think that listening voice has been very helpful. Much appreciated.
Excellent. So on sort of a light note, I'll say, John Dupuy and his Lynchies coming through Winchester High School might be part of the uptick because of that. But seriously, I did want to sort of echo some of what I heard, and some, I know we provide a lot of support in a lot of ways generally, and we also can't identify everyone who's struggling. So those are some real challenges. I am curious, as we look within and across subgroups, or really as we look at, as we try to figure out kids who are struggling, you had mentioned root causes, is there low-hanging fruit where if you had the opportunity to surge some either financial or policy resources to say, if we had this change or that resource, we could take, there's 18% of kids have a common issue going on, not of the general population, but of the struggling population, that we could, since these numbers do remain flat year over year for the most part, some nice tiny little trends down, but can we get a roughly 25% to drop to 21% or 20 or 18? I wonder if there's commonality in some of the ways they're struggling. Related to that, I wonder with regard to reporting, I don't really know what, I imagine there's people reporting to an adult, and then the adult's requirement to report things, communicate what level of confidentiality there is, because I perceive that maybe there would be a fear to report something if you're afraid that either you or they, or just understanding what that is, and if there's any disincentives there. And lastly, you had a lot of really wonderful support information within your presentation, and I wonder if there's a place really accessible on the website or somewhere that just even like on the drop-down, even with the supports, just have mental health, have just a page of all the different kinds of supports, who they're for, when you can call, what you should expect, and here's the number. And as well as the advice that we heard earlier tonight about first adult you should talk to is the one you feel most comfortable with. Second is maybe, the guidance counselor. Third is principal. Fourth is teacher. Some hierarchy, because I suspect, particularly if you're a struggling kid, you may not feel connected, and so you may not have a close adult. And also, lastly, I'll say, that strikes me as a metric, and there may be better metrics, but that may be one to say, let's surge resources around how do we get that one number of people feeling connected. It's hard when you try to address such a big issue across so many dimensions, but is there one dimension that perhaps a school committee could be convinced to say, hey, we want to try to make this one number change in the next year, and what would that take?
Thank you.
Did you have another comment?
Yeah, I was just going to follow up to that because you raised something for me. So Mahir, actually, maybe it's important to talk about the work that you did in bringing in Tony Leone from NAGLY, the North Shore Alliance of Gay and Lesbian Youth, to give a talk. I know it was primarily targeted at your colleagues on student council, but there's one thing that actually jumped out, so I was able to attend, and I know some other folks who've been prominent in the community, like Dot Butler and the coalition, were able to be part of that event. But one of the things that really struck me from that was how important it is to have a visual signifier of a safe space that students can go to, and making sure that you don't sort of overuse visual symbols as a way to, so thinking through, like, if somebody puts a sticker, whether it's a Progress Pride sticker or whatever it happens to be, maybe it's something related to racial ethnic identity, but basically, one of the things he raised was the idea that, you need to kind of periodically do an audit of sort of how those are used throughout the building, because, for example, if a staff member changes over and somebody, leaves a certain kind of sticker on their window, it might lead a student to think, who is sort of feeling the sense of disconnectedness, doesn't know where to go, that's a safe spot to go in that moment, but maybe that person doesn't have the expertise of the person who previously put that sticker on their window, for example. But it sort of makes me think about, really one of the things he said that he'd seen that was most impactful in his work was the idea of sort of, ways of signaling to students, especially when they're new, when they're, coming into the building for the first time, and it's, overwhelming new, to them. It's a place that they haven't been before, sort of being able to find the places where they can get specific levels of support. And also on the flip side, encouraging teachers to, or, teachers, administrators, whatever it happens to be, if they have a particular experience or identity themselves, that they're willing to be a touchstone or an anchor for a student, to be able to sort of visually show that, right? Sort of know where you can go in the building. And if you're brand new and you don't know anybody, you might sort of see a sticker and it might, or a poster or something, and it might catch your attention. So it got me thinking a lot as you were talking about sort of, ways that we can do things like that.
You raised such an interesting point, if I can follow up on that point, which is that so much of, I think, the support networks, as well as so many other things in our community, have to do with who you know. And so if you're not plugged into a network of people that, either have behavioral health expertise or connections, or they've had an experience or an identity, I thought that was just really interesting how you said you can subtly signal that, hey, I'm someone who's available to talk to, because it's those sort of unseen social networks that just drive so much in any community. But that's interesting.
I mean, I've said repeatedly that, for better or worse, representation matters, right? And that's, I think we are actually fortunate, I think, to be a place where we do have a fair amount of representation, in our schools. And I actually thought about, to your point about, Frank, you brought up the point about the middle school students, right? So I actually saw some real differences between the middle school and the high school students. And I do want to get more to the bottom of why that is, right? Because it's, I think on the one hand, it's a sort of macro level, a very fragile time, right? It's it's a much harder thing to be a, sixth grader struggling with gender identity, probably, than, maybe by the time you got into ninth grade, you've found more of those supports and resources, and you're able to have a little bit more, I won't say self-confidence necessarily, but you have a stronger self-concept, and you sort of probably put some of your things in place, right, as supports around you. But I would love to know a little bit more about the middle school, high school, because that was the other, so the last thing I'm sorry, this is just something that gets me going a lot, but one of the other things I noticed was sort of how the middle school and high school data seemed to suggest, at least, on the surface, some differences in terms of how students experiences, how students were experiencing things at those levels. So I don't know if that entirely dovetailed with what you had to say, but
Yeah, no, it did, and I was just gonna, as I want to mention one more thing, I mean, schools are often, for all kinds of reasons, seen as the ones that solve the problem. We have kids 180 days, and we have for 6.5 hours a day. So I think as we have these conversations, what are the experiences of our students in the community is really critically important. What happens to them all summer long? What happens to them when they're not in school on vacation? What happens when they're interacting with other departments, with other community members? And I think that as we think about this, we obviously, we have a captive audience with our students, and we have certainly more controlled environment for really being able to try to help. But I think we can't continue as public education to take on everything by ourselves. So, and that's as much on us as it is anywhere else, right? Because that's what we do, and we're educators, and we want to make things better and make things okay. But, I mean, with a community partnership, we already have a mechanism for a group of community members who are coming together to have these conversations. I think it would be good for us to think about ways that we can enhance that and reach out more. The Department of Health with the town, our other departments, from DPW to police and fire to whatever, are they having these conversations as their training that they're going through? And I know I've been in a lot of places. We are super fortunate to have, and I can only speak really to, I can very much speak to our SRO and our community resource officers. I mean, they're just fantastic. Like, they get kids in ways that I've seen some educators elsewhere not get kids. So I think they'd be absolutely engaged partners in the work. But I just want to say that out loud, because it is our tendency to say, we have a problem, let's fix it, right? I mean, that middle school kid, are there other things that are happening in their lives within the community, from youth sports to whatever it may be, that's impacting, because they're not coming to us and feeling okay until they come through the door, right? It's an issue that they're carrying with them, and they need a broader safety net of support than what we might be able to provide, although we have the best shot, so.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I'll tell two quick stories. So one of them, Meher already heard and some of the others who were here heard. So when we moved to Winchester in 2018, we actually put a Progress Pride flag out on our front porch. And one of the sort of most heartwarming things that's happened to us, or at least me, since we moved to the community, was one of our neighbors. We have a lot of folks who walk by our house, stop because we have a big garden in the front yard. And she said, I don't think you probably fully understood what you were doing when you put that flag out. But my son, who probably now would have graduated from the high school 3 years ago, came home on his run and said, Mom, there was a family that put a pride flag out on their house a few blocks away. And he kept mentioning it week after week on his run. He would say, now I run by their house in case anything goes wrong. I run by their house because I know that's a house that I can trust. And it changed my whole perception of, he said, it's the first time I ever saw it in the neighborhood except on our house, right? These things matter, right? And I think the other thing I'll say is, I've been involved now with the Pride Fest that happens in town. This will be the third year. And last year there was an incident where somebody screamed something, driving by in a car. And I just wanted to echo what you said. It was actually the school resource officers who were helping out with that event last year. And one of them was the one who came to me and said, hey, I heard that you heard something, and I explained the whole thing, and it was, obviously handled in an appropriate way, I'm sure. But there was a level of understanding that I think was impressive. I think you're absolutely right about not every community has that benefit. But, didn't have any, sort of lack of understanding. It was a very quick conversation. Here's what was said. Here's, the license number of the car that it was said from while they were driving by. And he said, I take it from here. So I think we're very lucky in that respect as well.
Yeah.
So.
Well, thank you for everything you're doing, and you have a committee that I think wants to be supportive however we can. So in particular, I appreciate the data and the reports biannually on this, but if there are things, I'd encourage you to be creative, think out of the box. We can always say, no, we can't do that, but I don't know that we have any answers per se, and I know it's a community-wide thing, but I'd love to hear it if you have ideas.
And you don't get to hear from Erin very often, but, can publicly say, it's pretty clear she has a pretty good handle on, and she's not been here long. So to really know what's happening in our schools, and her job is ridiculously broad, which is another conversation we need to have at some point. It's kind of like, I don't want to do this. Okay, and I think that the position came together in that way because it needed to. But now it's at a level, especially when you have someone talented and invested, that she can't be all things to everybody. That's my job. And I just think we need to really think about that as we move forward, about how how we are looking at those responsibilities and what supports that are needed beyond what, not just Erin, but we have, so.
Yeah, we can only spread someone so far, so, Dr. Allen.
I was just going to share, thank you for the offered support too, and I just want to thank the committee and the community for what we've been able to do with so many new positions over time, right? I was thinking about our first SEL coach was hired, 7, 8 years ago now, and it's just been a steady build. There's been 5 since then, and it's really appreciated and makes a difference, so we're thankful for that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, it's good to hear that the investment and support is really paying off. So.
It really is very helpful, thank you.
And I also wanted to say thank you. I know you are actually going out into the community and presenting this further, so thank you for your willingness to, act beyond just the school department and,
She has a whole road show.
Yeah.
It's like
and it's so important, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, these data matter.
Excellent. Well,
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, subcommittee updates.
Now it's upside down. Now I'm in trouble.
Uh-oh.
Erin, you can.
Thank you.
Erin has, she's free to go?
She is free to
But
go.
she
You're,
is.
you're always welcome to stay, but we know you have a lot of work.
My family will appreciate my
Yes.
return home.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. As you can see, we're a very family-friendly group here.
Yes.
Had my unexpected 3-year-old adjunct member of the committee.
we've all been there.
So, curriculum.
So curriculum subcommittee, I think we can, you've heard part of our last meeting. Erin did present the YRBS data, and maybe, I don't know, Karen, but with Michelle not here, we might want to wait on the rest.
I'll say what I said the last time, probably for a more fulsome discussion, and then so that we have Mr. Nixon readily available as well. It would probably behoove us to have both of them in person as well.
Right, is that the same for policy?
65 miles an hour.
Oh, there's Mr. Nixon.
We heard pieces of that. I think you're going so fast that it broke up.
Maybe you're in a tunnel.
The speed of sound, you've broken it.
Are we waiting for Mr. Nixon? No.
No.
All right,
I guess the only thing I would say as a very high-level overview is that the curriculum subcommittee had met. We reviewed the and Ms. Kuhn had reviewed the YRBS and MCIEA, Massachusetts Consortium for Innovative Educational Assessment, school quality survey data around social emotional health with us. And talked a little bit about, or talked mainly about standards-based grading at the middle school and its inception and development, and then also talked at the policy. And I guess if I'm moving
blend
on
right
to
into
policy,
yeah, that's fine.
another high overview. Oh, boy, I'm just thinking. We just had a policy meeting. So the policy subcommittee has met 3 times now, once in December, once in March, mainly speaking with nurse leader Miss Lynn Vazella. And we have been talking about Ms. Vazella has brought to us some updates on nursing policy and life-threatening allergies policy. And then most recently, today, she was talking with us about nursing work around field trip policy. And then we have also been reviewing handbooks busily so that we can bring them back to you on May 28th, along with the nursing policies, along with some other policies. So.
Excellent. We don't need, no questions.
No.
No.
I was.
I know you were there today.
I was at this was my first subcommittee meeting today. I guess that's another milestone. But, it's deeply detail-oriented work, but also very important work. So grateful to all the folks who are digging in and doing that. I think that's a good update for today. Thank you.
It was a little overwhelming for me because there's a lot of like thinking and skill sets around mind-numbing detail. So I'm
So exciting.
still a little tired from it, actually. So I've got to make some adjustments, but it was a good meeting.
Excellent. If there's no, any other comments, questions on curriculum or policy? Okay.
No.
Then superintendent update on open enrollment for the 24-25 school year.
Sure. So as you know, by policy, every year we look at we have an open enrollment policy. And I think I just want for everyone's benefit and maybe for my own as well, the school department has an open enrollment policy, which is a local school department Winchester policy. This policy does not exist everywhere else. In fact, I've never seen it before, which makes it fun. But there's also school choice, which is a state requirement that every single year, and at the next meeting, you're going to have a public hearing on school choice, and every year, every school system has to have a public hearing on school choice, which means we're talking about students who would be coming into Winchester from other communities. Open enrollment are our own kids, and we're talking about the policy allows for the identification of certain grade levels at certain schools to be able to sign up for consideration to be able to attend a school that they're not assigned to currently. So I just want to make that distinction only because there is a little bit confusing. It's not, it is not typical. So what we're talking about tonight is open enrollment. Last year, if you remember, in the last 2 years, actually, the committee has suspended pieces of the policy to allow the superintendent, me, to be more flexible with consideration of open enrollment. We've really, essentially, we've kind of opened it to everybody. We've not identified certain schools at certain grade levels, partly because things have changed. I think when the open enrollment policy was implemented, or one of the benefits, real benefits of the open enrollment policy had to have been when the district was experiencing really rapid growth. And trying to even out those class sizes and opening that opportunity for parents so that it was kind of a, I don't want to say it quite this way, but it's a little bit of a voluntary redistricting of certain students, because you just run into situations where the resources may not be at one school, but they may be at the other. And we've talked about this notion that every year we get to see a town meeting of the one K through 5 school that certain town meeting members like to talk about, and how we have too many sections open, but we don't have one K through 5 school. So the neighborhood schools are districted for the neighborhood that they're districted for, and there obviously are fluctuations in where families move in, what's available for real estate. I mean, we see a lot of changes. So, so the open enrollment policy has allowed, I'm sure, to really help manage that. Because I would just say that all of our schools I would send my child to any one of these schools. So it's really not about a school choice from like a Title I or, perspective where the federal government says it is an underperforming school, so now you've got to be able to offer this to the families, offer the opportunity to go somewhere else. So, but things have changed, and primarily what's changed is that we're no longer really dealing with concerns about having too many kids at a grade level, and we're on the brink of having to make this decision about, do we hire another staff member? Do we have space in the building to hire another staff member? That's really not where we are. Right now, where we are in this point in time, and we have been for the last 2 or 3 years since COVID, we're in a place where it's almost the opposite. Like, we're on the cusp in a lot of our grade levels in a lot of our schools where we really, you can go from 4 to 3, but do you do it? And then if we have situations where right now, currently, there's not one grade level in one school that has fewer than 3 sections. I get really nervous about thinking about going to 2 sections in any grade level in any school because it's just not really healthy for the professional environment. You only have 2 teachers teaching a group of kids. There's less options, less choice, less flexibility in terms of assignments. And then we also get into the issue of we have students who need additional support and needs, right, from EL services, which we continue to try to keep up with that, and speech and language services, any kind of special education services. So because open enrollment's open to everybody, right? We can't say, well, your child has a certain need that we can't fulfill over at this school. So it affects everything. So if we could have a situation where a student who needs speech and language is approved to open enrollment going to another school, and we don't have enough speech and language services, so then we're trying to figure out how to assign somebody to provide that service. And as you already know, we have traveling people. We lose 20% of time for every one of our staff members who share between schools because they need travel time, and that's built into the contract. So it's just more challenging, I think, right now because we're not in a period of growth. And I'm also concerned about the developments that are coming on in town. We are starting to see some enrollment from River Street, actually, at the Lynch School. We don't know yet really what all those numbers might bring and then on top of it all, we're 1 year away from Lynch opening, which is exciting. But we also, we really kind of need to stabilize and really know what's happening when we go to Lynch, because I think that, Lynch is going to be a big school. We're going to have room at Lynch, and I think future conversations around where our students go have to be on the table as they were, I believe, when VO opened, in terms of where we district students. So, and I don't know that we're going to need to do anything or not, but what I don't want to do is start granting open enrollment seats to then 1 year or 2 years later say, well, I know we granted that open enrollment seat for you to go to this school, but we're changing the districts and now you're going back to this school or going to that school. So for all those reasons, I currently would not be recommending that we open any seats for open enrollment going into next year. Things can change. We don't have a lot of time for that change, but last year we were actually making some decisions near the end of the summer, because we really tried to play it out more, and Lynch complicated things a little bit too. So I would just say to you at this point, I would not be comfortable recommending that we use open enrollment this year, going into next year, and give ourselves a year to kind of stabilize, see what the developments bring, see what enrollment does just as through just the bounce back from COVID, and then get into Lynch and then have a broader conversation.
Questions? Comments? Go ahead.
Just one question with the, you had mentioned, what was it? You had mentioned that if students were assigned to a school via open enrollment, but then a few years down the road, if there were redistricting, they could be pulled back. But isn't part of the policy that if you're assigned to a school, then that student stays at that school, no matter what? Does that preclude redistricting or not? Or is that
Well,
just another?
No, it's a great question. I mean, we wouldn't be able to really, we'd have to have a conversation about our open enrollment policy. We'd have to know the students that we've already granted open enrollment to, but we have students who are assigned to a certain school. They're guaranteed, or we say that they have to go there, who are also saying, you can't, you're not going here anymore, if that were to be the
That is
case,
true.
right? So, I mean,
Yeah.
I think it's kind of a level playing field. When we do open enrollment, we do say that they are there, and that's for the purposes of not, saying, well, you can have 1 year here, but then you've got to return. We want to make sure that we provide families with that stability, but if we're into a redistricting situation, if we were in that situation, then we would have to look at everybody, in fairness.
I'll say I've learned a lot about enrollment over the last, and we've only done the little study on enrollment, but one of the things that I found really interesting is that the housing turnover is actually, one of the largest drivers of enrollment growth. So, we talk about the 40Bs and the new developments and all of these other things, driving all these students, and they do. But, the people in big houses who just happen to sell, and a whole family with a bunch of kids moving in, is a equally, if not greater, driver. And so, hearing all of the variables that we're dealing with coming out of COVID, with the new Lynch being built, with the new housing developments in place, with class sizes and declining, enrollment and shifting, and you can take off, that's fine.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
No.
Yeah, good luck, and thank you for staying this long.
Thank you for everything.
Thank
And thank you
you.
for the contributions, yeah.
Have a good night.
But just to say that it's a highly complex equation, and we're in a period of some, settling
Major
out, or,
changes.
what is it?
Major changes.
Major, that's a good way to say it, just major changes. I was trying to think of a fancy word. But yes, I appreciate that and support that. Any other comments, questions? Should we do we need a motion and vote on this then? Or do you?
Mr. Nixon, well, I don't know whether he has.
I'll try if you can hear. Do you hear me well enough?
Yeah, we do, actually, very good.
Put a microphone by it for everyone.
So,
Kim.
yeah, I wanted to remind the committee, we redistricted, the last time we redistricted was in November of 2012. That was 10 months before the Vincent Owen opened up. And to Dr. Hackett's point, Lynch is a big school. We also have some large housing projects that have either they've completed development and now they're leasing up, or they've reached substantial completion. And then there's, the updated 5 and 10-year enrollment demographic study that's a part of the master plan that town meeting just funded. I have to believe we're going to start having a conversation soon about the need to redistrict. And that conversation is also going to be informed by, how big of a Morocco does the master plan suggest we build? So, as we know, our plan is to submit an SOI as early as January, might be February, can't be any later than March. I think that's the right time to kind of come back and have some of these conversations. We'll certainly know a lot more, but I mean, that's after the school year starts. So I'm totally in support of what you're suggesting, Dr. Hackett, for all the reasons that you did. But I'm really looking forward to having some of these conversations in the winter or early spring once we've gone through some of these processes. If you haven't seen the playground on River Street, you should go check it out. It's a huge selling point for families with young kids. So it'll be interesting to see if our own internal projections on student census coming out of that project were even close. But I support it for all the reasons you just said, and I don't even think we need to take a vote tonight. I think if we choose to participate in school choice, open enrollment, I just made the slip. I think we have to make that. We have to take that vote. But if we choose not to, I'm actually not sure there's even any action necessary.
All right. So it sounds like there's no action
No
necessary,
action.
but I think we're generally good with that.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so the next item is review of the school committee summer meeting dates. And everyone should have a copy of those, but they're July 18th from 10 to 1, August 8th from 10 to 1, and August 27th from 4:30 to 7:30 p.m. And I'll say I have a possibility of a conflict on the 8th, but I don't know yet. But I'm fine with the dates as they are, and it was a change since I gave my info to Aaron.
And we're talking about remote meetings. So, and, while we're doing a lot of work, the school committee lift during the summer months is not as heavy.
Right, yeah. And obviously.
We have time for policy subcommittee to crank out some policies now.
Exactly. Is there any action on this, or is this just an update?
No, I guess my question was, your conflict on the 8th, was it because of time? Because I noticed that it's 2 daytime morning meetings and then 1 afternoon.
We can be flexible on the time, just like on the days.
That was,
yeah.
Thank you. You anticipated my question elegantly.
I saw the times, and they're in the summer, and I marked them on my calendar, so I should be able to adjust things around them. It is something to think about, because it's a big chunk of time in the middle of a day that could
That's
go
what
over. For now, though, I think that's fine. It's not like the whole year we've just planned. But no, that was that was a different thing. I'll explain later. But
that's. I just wanted to ask, because I did notice the times were variable, and I was trying to quickly solve a question. I guess my other question would be just around meeting time. So I know we have to settle on the times for the remainder of the school year, and so I just don't know, whether. There are only 3 of us here, but I think we should probably try to just circle up on that, because I know that there have been some conflicts in trying to move around and settle that. So, because obviously this is starting on July 18th,
right,
but we have sort of regular meetings that would be continuing at least for another several weeks, right?
Yeah. Current meetings?
There's like two.
Yeah, we've got 2 left.
Okay.
So currently, what we're scheduled for is the 28th, Tuesday the 28th, and then June 11, which is for the Tuesday.
Will be a conflict for me, so hopefully we can maybe find a better.
Yep, and I think part of it too, I would envision maybe that might be also part of a discussion after reorganization potentially, because I think there's some interest, or there have been some ideas floated about just like the 2 meetings per month and how we do that for conversation. But, the 11th, we're getting down to it. I'm really hoping, we also have one penciled in for the 25th, but the goal is to not use that meeting date.
And I know in the past, we've sort of split the difference and done every other one during the day and every other one in the evening, and we should see what everyone's availabilities and preferences are.
Exactly.
All right. So anticipated future agenda items, elementary literacy study updates will continue. 2024-25 student handbooks, we're really excited to hear the policy committee's been working on. And we have a May 28th first reading and June 11th approval on that targeted. McCall 24-25 program of studies, subcommittee updates, update on the new IEP, and updated health policies. Any other agenda items that we need to consider?
Reorganization.
Oh, and reorganization, we could add that right in here too.
And I think specifically.
I think I could do another school capital projects update.
Okay.
Getting into that.
That's separate and apart from, capital priorities. That's different, but I can give an update on some things that have actually wrapped up.
Excellent.
28th, Mr. Nixon, or the 11th?
I think I could do the 28th.
Okay.
Sure.
Okay.
Also, potentially the updated, never mind. I was going to say the updated purchasing and procurement policies, but that still has to.
It's possible.
Okay, all right.
Do you have that?
Possibly updated purchasing and procurement and student activity accounts policies.
Okay.
And I think we still have the holding over of the second part of the curriculum subcommittee update. So we got to the youth risk behavior data tonight,
Right.
but there was a second part of that that I know
Right.
is a follow-up to the prior meeting around
Yep.
standards-based reporting.
Okay, curriculum and policy updates. All right. We can certainly adjust this outside of our meeting as well. Future meeting dates, May 28th, we just heard about, with the public hearing on school choice, May 28th, regular meeting, and June 11th, plus those dates we just heard for the summer. And with that, we are actually 10 minutes early.
Yeah.
So should we just stretch it out a little bit longer? And yeah.
Shall I make a motion to adjourn?
Yes, if that is your motion, we can ask for a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, we are
Aye.
adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you,
All right,
WinCam.
Thank you. Thanks, WinCam.